Okay, so yesterday I got the engine out of the car, I got the intake off, got the oil pan off, got the timing cover off. Now what we're going to do is we're going to swap the cam, swap the heads, put new rocker arms, all that stuff on there, get everything sealed back up. Then we're going to stick a new converter in the transmission, put the engine back in there, and hopefully get this thing fired up today. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do, take all my rocker arms loose, get my rocker arms push rods out of the way, put them up somewhere. Then I'll start taking out head bolts, get the heads off. Then I'm going to remove the timing chain and the cam. Okay, so I got the heads off, I got my mess cleaned up mostly. I'm going to get the cam gear off, get the lifters out, get the camshaft out. Then I'm going to clean everything really good. Then I'll start putting the new parts in, the new cam and the new heads, and I'll show you what those are. All right, we'll start pulling my lifters out, and I'm going to save the lifters just because I might use this cam and lifters again. That's a terrible idea, but I might try it one day. It's a factory 300 horsepower cam, which is still tiny. I've marked the front of my box, and I'm going to keep these lifters in the order that they come out. So ideally, if you're going to reuse a cam and lifters, you got to keep the lifters on the same lobe. And honestly, you really need to keep it in the same block, because if the block has machining tolerances, the lifter may not sit on the cam lobe the same way that it's lapped into, and it'll probably be a failure. I may or may not try to reuse this cam and lifters at some point. I said I admit it's a bad idea, but something just tells me not to chunk a perfectly good cam and lifters. All right, now to get the cam out without causing any damage. Instead of a cam handle, I usually use the timing gear and a bolt. Yikes. There we go. Had me worried there for a minute. I messed up a cam bearing. Alright, now with the cam out, what I've done is I've cleaned all the antifreeze out of my cylinders real quick, because there's a little bit left in there from where I poured everything out. I cleaned that out real good, sprayed it with some WD-40 to make sure I don't get any flash rust. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean my china walls on the front and rear. I'm going to clean my deck surfaces. I'm going to clean my oil pan rail, my timing cover gasket, all that. Get all that old gasket material and filler off, or RTV off. And once I get that done, I'm going to clean everything really well, clean the oil pan really well. I'm going to go ahead and put my cam in, put my heads on, put my timing cover, my oil pan on, get all that buttoned up, and then I can get this thing put back together and in the car. But I want to get it as clean as I can before I start putting my new parts anywhere near it. Alright, I got this whole thing clean as I'm going to get it. I got the pistons clean, I got the decks clean, got the oil pan rails clean, everything on the front, and I sprayed a little bit more paint on the block. I got the lifter valley clean, got all that. Like I said, clean as I'm going to get it. It's clean enough. Probably never clean enough, but it's pretty clean. I've got my camshaft here. This is a new camshaft. Now this is a Summit brand flat tappet hydraulic camshaft. Now, flat tappet cams, they're real easy to wipe the lobes. The key thing is to getting the right amount of lube on them, getting it started up right away, and having good lifters. Now, most camshafts are, at least the cores, are made by 2 or 3 companies. Camshaft Machine Company, and which this was made by, because it says CWC on it, which that company got bought out by Camshaft Machine, and they still use that blank. Anyway, I don't know who makes the grinds the cores for Summit, but it's a 488 lift cam, 234 at 50 duration, and it's got 114 degree lobe separation. So it ought to sound pretty good, and it ought to perform pretty good with the heads that I'm going to put on this. Now, I've got my bearing lube. I'm gonna put a little bit of bearing lube on this cam. I've already got this cam washed and cleaned up. I'm gonna put a little bit of bearing lube on it. And then I'm gonna take and put my lobe lube, squeeze some of that on all my rear lobes. And I just want to do the last 4 lobes. Then I'm going to slide it in part of the way. Till that second bearing goes in. And now that'll hold it where I can put the rest of the lobes, get some lube on those without having to hold it. Alright, now my camshaft is in, and I can get my timing gear, I can get everything lined up, get my timing gear on there. I've already got my bottom at top dead center. Well, I've got my dot up already, top dead center for number 6. But anyway, alright, so I've got that done. Now it's time to get my cam gear cleaned up, get my chain back on, and get some Loctite on these bolts and get that put back together. There we go. Alright, I'm going to put some blue Loctite on these. And then I'll get them torqued down. The head gaskets I'm using are the Felpro High Performance. It's what the heads are actually supposed to use. When you look at suggested parts for the heads, they suggest the Felpro head gaskets. Should be fine. Like I said, they're the nicer Felpro gaskets. So let me show you what heads I'm going to use. Okay, so I'm going to be using the Summit Racing 200cc heads. Now, what these are they are Brodix Iron Killer 200 heads, the IK200s, and they've got Summit's logo on them. I've found that out from several reputable sources that these are the IK200 heads. So they've got comp springs on them, comp guide plates and rocker studs, all good parts. So it's not like a Chinese cylinder head where you get a bunch of crap parts in it. This has got quality components. So I've already cleaned everything up. Got it ready to go. I'm going to get these set on here and I'm going to bolt them down with some ARP head bolts. Now pretty much all of the head bolts on a small block Chevrolet go into a water jacket unless you've got like an aftermarket block or something. So I'm going to put some ARP thread sealer on each bolt and some on me. It's not my day, is it? I'm gonna get all of them started, then I'm gonna get everything torqued down. All right, so I got my heads on and torqued down. On the head bolts, I put a little bit of ARP thread sealer on the threads, and then I put some ARP torque lube or whatever they call it under the head bolts like the instructions say. Got these torqued down to 70 foot-pounds, and now I'm going to flip it over, put my oil pan on, flip it back over, then I can put the lifters in, push rods and rocker arms, get the valve train adjusted. I've got the oil pan rails on, my bolts in, everything's tightened down. I made sure I had silicone squeeze or RTV squeezing out of both of my end caps just to make sure that I had good contact and everything there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover up my oil filter adapter. I'm going to clean up the oil pan some and go ahead and spray paint the oil pan and the timing cover. See if I can make that look a little bit better. Then I can flip this thing over, put my lifters in, get my push rods in, and adjust the valves. Alright, so it's time to put the lifters in. Now, I'm using actual Chevrolet part number lifters. They've got the hardened foot on the bottom. These are the best lifters you can get for a small block Chevrolet as far as flat tappet go. I'm going to put a bunch of this cam lobe on the bottom and set them down in each hole. Alright, I've got my push rods here. They are Howard's stock length push rods. I'm going to start with these and then I'll check the push rod length and make sure that they are correct. If they aren't correct, then I'll have to go buy some that are the right size. Alright, so the rocker arms I'm using are some Comp High Energy, which are pretty much an exact copy of the old Crane Energizer. And I'm going to put those on. They are 1.5 ratio. Alright, so it's time to put the gaskets on. So I'm going to put a little bit of RTV around the water jacket, mainly just enough to hold the gasket in place. And these heads are gasket matched for a 1206 Velcro gasket, and that's what I'm using. And now I'm going to put my RTV on my China walls on the front and rear. Alright. Now it's time to set the intake down on it. I'm going to let that sit up for about 5 or 10 minutes. Let the RTV kind of set up a little bit. And then I'll set the intake down on it. Okay, so I've got my intake on. I got my valve covers on. Got all that tightened up. I'm ready to pull this thing off the stand, put the flex plate on it, get it back in the car. But first, I got to put the new torque converter in. Okay, so I'm going to have to get down in here and put this torque converter in. I don't really think you're going to be able to see much of it. Maybe the back of my shirt, but we're going to try. Alright, now this converter is an FTI 28 to 3000 stall. So, same brand converter that I've got in Chevy Nova, but it's a little bit tighter stall. So we'll see. And putting the converter in, you got to be careful. You can get it not all the way in and then damage the pump if you try to force it. It's in one click. It's got to go a couple more. And it's going to fight me a little bit. Okay, so this has not went to plan at all, but that's okay. Now, had a little hiccup. I got the torque converter in, and it wasn't the right converter. I got it in, I started noticing, I looked at the part number that was stamped on the bottom of the torque converter. You know, it was in ink. And I was like, that doesn't look right. So I looked up the part number on the box, and it was a different part number. I looked up on the website, and apparently FTI boxed the converter wrong. So I had a 3082 box with a 6082 converter. I thought I had a 3000 stall, and I had a 3600 stall, which is a bit too high for what I'm doing. Now, took it back to Summit, and I ended up having to get a B&M 3200 whole shot. So the converter that came out was a B&M 2400 Torque Master, and it didn't really stall very high at all, like barely above stock. But I wanted to go with a 3000, 2800 to 3200 is what I wanted. I had the FTI 28 to 3000. It turned out not to be 3000. Couldn't get one a day, so I ended up getting the B&M whole shot. We got that one, 3200. Hopefully it won't stall quite that high because it's such a small motor, and it'll be all right. Now I'll be cruising at 65 mile an hour around 3000 RPM, but you're not making a lot of horsepower and torque at 3000 RPM. Hopefully not enough to slip the converter and cause any overheating issues. So Only one way to find out. So we're going to get the engine stuck back in now. Now I got the new converter, the second new converter, the new converter. It's in the car. I've got it set back, made sure it was installed all the way. It's ready to go. We're going to set the engine down in there and start getting this thing ready to fire back up. Alright, so it took me about 5-10 minutes of kind of messing around with it. This side was dead on, that side was not. I kept trying to pull this side up, and so it would slip into the dowel pin on the back of the block. I ended up having to put a pry bar under that motor mount and putting the motor mount bolt in over here, which just pushed in real easy, and picking up on that so the whole engine didn't move sideways. And then when it rotated, it popped into place and it set down there. So it's sitting on there perfect now. I should be able to get the bolts in, no problem. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the pressure off the chain, and I need to go under there and make sure that my torque converter is actually in the flex plate and will spin around without any binding. Alright, so engine is in there. I got one engine bolt in, or motor mount bolt in, and then the other side motor mount bolt, I'm fixing to try to put it in. Hopefully it's dead center where it needs to be. We'll see. Let's see here. There we go. It went in with no resistance at all. I'm gonna get my lock nut started on it. Then I'm gonna get my chain out of the way, and then I can start putting my rest of my transmission bolts in. I got 2 of them in real quick to make sure it was pulled up. I got under there, made sure my torque converter spun around freely. Looks like I got about 3/16 of an inch between the torque converter and the flex plate. So I'll probably have to add some shims, but I've got some of those. I got some hardened washers I use for shimming up torque converters. So anyways, I've got that done, should be fine, and I'm going to get the rest of the transmission bolts in. Then I'll get under there and get the torque converter measured exactly. Want to make sure I have the right clearance on that so it's engaged with the pump correctly. And then we can start putting the headers on, the starter, headers, and then some spark plugs, and start getting everything hooked back up. Okay, so it's the next day. Now that I've got my distributor in, got it locked down where 0 should be, and I'll have to adjust that later with the computer. But I'm going to put my torque converter bolts in. I can spin it over now without having to worry about that. As soon as I get the torque converter bolts in, I can throw my starter on, my headers on, and I should be done pretty much underneath the car. I can let it down off the jack stands, don't have to worry about having it up. Make everything on the front of the car easier to reach. Alright, well that didn't go as planned. First, my GoPro wasn't on. I thought it was, and it wasn't. Second, I went live and fired it up, and it was really loud and dumped all the oil on the ground. Now the loud part was easy because I forgot to put the O2 sensor in. The oil off the ground, I've got a little brass elbow on the back of the block that I hook my oil pressure gauge to, and apparently I hit it with the chain while I was putting the engine in, and because I left it in and cracked it, so it sprayed oil everywhere whenever I fired the motor up. So I'm hoping I didn't hurt anything on the camshaft with it not having oil for the 10 or 15 seconds that I ran it. Or maybe it had oil, it just didn't have the right amount, I'm not sure. But now I've got a giant mess. Looks like the Exxon Valdez came through my shop. So I'm going to clean this up. I've already got, I'm going to run get another fitting. I'm going to clean this up, and I've already got my O2 sensor in, so we'll try it again here in just a few minutes. All right, so I finally got this thing running. I got the cam broke in. I did not get it on video because once it cranked up, I didn't have the video running, and I couldn't stop it because I had such a hard time getting this thing to run. It was really aggravating. Something was going on with the EFI, and I still don't know what, which also has me worried. But anyway, we got it broke in. I ran it for about 22 minutes, anywhere between 2,200 and 2,500 RPM. So now we're going to cut the oil filter and see if we got anything in there. And one thing I'm a little worried about is that the let's hold this thing. Come on, you dummy. One thing I'm a little worried about is one of my rocker arms, my poly locks, apparently didn't get tightened. So I'm worried that I screwed that up. So I had to go back in and tighten that through, and I went back through and adjusted all of them again, or checked all of them again, and they were all fine. But if you have one that wasn't tight and comes loose, if the lifter stops spinning, it can be the end for your camshaft. So I hope that's not the case. I hope I didn't screw up. It's one thing to have it happen and you do everything right, because it can still happen, but to screw up really sucks. So I see all my Molly lube in there. I'm not sure about that stuff down there. I don't see any metal in the stuff dripping on the table yet. Alright, well, there was a little bit of metal in the oil filter. I mean, it was a very, very, very small amount, but considering what I'm fixing to do with this car, it's got me worried. So I'm going to pull the intake off. I've already got everything ready. I'm just going to pry up on it. I'm going to pull a couple of lifters out, probably all the lifters. I'm going to look at them and see how bad it is. I'm going to get water all in the engine, but that's okay. The one that I had come loose on me was right here, number 1 exhaust. So I'm going to go ahead and pull it off first. Pull the lifter out. I think that's got the best chance of damage. Not that there's anything good about it, but since it is the one that backed off a little bit. I see metal on the push rod. That lifter looks okay. Looks like it was spinning. I can't tell how much you can see on the bottom of that, but it looks like it was spinning, so that's a good thing. Well, that was fun. Actually, it wasn't. Well, really, it was fun. I love working on my cars, even when it doesn't go right. Now, so I decided I was going to change the heads and the camshaft in this car to give it a little more power. I put a different converter in it, and then I put it all back together, and then I went live to crank it up, and I had a giant oil leak. Now, what the oil leak ended up being was my sending unit. My oil pressure gauge is electric. My sending unit comes off the back of the block. I have a brass elbow there, and after I primed the engine, I was getting out of the car, I had put my pressure on there. I kind of slipped a little bit, and I hit the brass block and broke it off, or cracked it, so it was spraying oil all behind the engine. So that was the oil leak. And then the O2 sensor, I had forgotten to stick it in there, and that was the loud noise. in the live video. I also did not turn the GoPro on during the live video. I was using my phone. So the footage of that is from the phone, not the camera. But anyway, I got the O2 sensor in there after I cleaned all the plugs off because it dumped a bunch of fuel in the engine because it didn't see the O2 sensor. Well, the O2 sensor was there. It just, anyway, a calamity of errors, all mine. So now this thing is cold. I had an oil leak. I chased an oil leak. I fixed the giant oil leak, and then I had an oil pan leaking, and I had to get this thing tuned, which a lot of did not get on camera. But oil pan leaking, fixed that. This thing's cold. It's been sitting overnight because I had to take the oil pan partially loose, and this block has dipstick mounts or bosses on either side, and the gasket that I used did not cover that completely. So here we are. It's a cold engine. We're going to crank it up. We're going to go for a test drive. Alright, so I've got everything put back together. I've already burned one spark plug wire, so I'm going to have to get some heat sleeves to put over the end of my spark plug wires because the new heads have got the spark plugs out just a little bit farther, and on a couple of them they're touching the wires. So I'll have to straighten that out, but I've got it good enough right now to be able to drive it. Plus I need a new air cleaner, but that's not a big deal. So we're going to get in here, get in my ratty interior, turn the computer on. I'm fixing to change shifters too, which is why that's all pulled out. Alright, my coolant tip is 81 degrees, which is about the temperature outside. And now we're going to crank this thing up. Sounds pretty good. Okay, so all of that was filmed before we left for Rocky Mountain Race Week, and now we are back. I didn't get a chance to finish the video and get it out before we left. Now, the car did great. We had zero problems on Rocky Mountain Race Week as far as the car breaking down or anything like that. I did have to change plugs. I went to a shorter plug because I burned a couple of spark plug boots, but didn't break down. Like I said, I just had a break up going up to the mountains. The headers got one of the boots. So I changed the spark plug wire. I put an insulating, one of those little insulating boots around the end of the spark plug wire, and then I changed spark plugs, and they're shorter, so it gave me more room around the headers. Now the car sounds really good. It was a lot slower than I thought. I think the car will run some high 12s, 13s, low 13s here in Georgia, but at altitude I really thought it would be faster, and it wasn't. Now I did have that stumble at the beginning when I'm leaving the line. As soon as I'd get up on the converter, it would go dead lean, and it was bad. Now like I mentioned in the other video, Skylar did help me fix that to a degree, and it got better, but it never did completely go away good enough for me to really put down a good 60-foot time. Plus my converter is nowhere near where I thought it would be. Now torque converters are kind of funny about how they stall. They'll advertise a 3200 stall speed, but you know, if you don't make the same amount of torque and power and have the same weight and gear and all that stuff as whatever they tested it with or rated at, then it's going to stall differently. So I was really disappointed in the converter. I'm going to order another converter and get another converter for it eventually, but right now that car's staying put together like it is because it's very reliable. Like I said, I didn't have any issues with it. I am going to get my buddy to professionally tune it for me so he can make that stumbling stuff a little bit better, so I have the best chance I can. I'm going to run it here locally, see what it'll run. I'm still hoping for low 13s, high 12s here, but with the stall converter being so tight, who knows. Thanks for checking this out, guys. Sorry the video ended up so long. I cut it into 2 halves because there was just so much information there, and I edited out a lot of detail, and I know some of you guys like the detail, but it would be 5 videos if I made it into the type of video that gets views and you get the detail. So maybe I'll start doing a members only type video where I go into more detail, and then the regular channel will get the other. I'm not sure. We'll see. Anyway, check out some of my other videos. Like, subscribe. See you next time.